Classic Harrison Price for Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the historic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you got your tickets to the game, why not make it a full experience? Stay downtown at the Wall Center, call 604-331-1000, ask for the Harrison Price rate. Some blackout dates apply based on availability. Matt Sakaris with Blake Price, four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up for you where, well, it's starting to come into view. More on that in a second. Our poll question today: Hughes Hronek, Susie Myers, Forbert Desharnais. Is this the best way to slot the Canucks defense pairs? Yes or no? You can vote at our X and YouTube channels. I ask you, Blake Price.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say it's better to make sure that they do not have a granite block. And by granite block, I mean stuck to the ground, granite block defensive.
Have to be more specific. Is that Forbert? Is that Desharnais? Is that
yes?
Both?
And normally that's said in like a nice way. Oh, he's just a granite block defenseman. In this case, I mean stuck to the earth and unable to move. And I would try to sway away from that, and that would be putting one of the more mobile of the two big guys in Susie and Myers with one of the two more immobile big guys in Forbert and Desharnais. So I'll say no. There's a different way to skin this.
I can remember years ago asking Neil McAvoy of the BC Lions about an offensive lineman who was switching positions, who sort of did not have great feet. And he said to me, well, there's one thing the guy can do. It's anchor. Puts his foot in the ground. Not a lot of movement after that.
Isaac Newton.
Yeah.
Has a big sway here.
Johnny Appleseed.
Yes.
Well, you were eloquent on this last week when you talked about having a small slab of butter remaining and 2 pieces of toast. Do you butter the one piece and then go dry on the second piece, or do you spread out the butter so you have buttered toast?
But there's not that much butter, period. Let's be clear. There's not much butter.
Not a lot of butter.
You spread it out over the whole piece of toast, and it's still not that great a piece of toast.
But at least it's a buttered full piece of toast.
Somewhat.
I told you I like my toast buttered. So I am also going to vote no. I am going to go Susie Desharnais, Forbert Myers, because you have at least a skater and a decent puck transporter on each pair.
Yeah.
And look, when we're down to brass tacks and we're protecting the lead, then I go Susie Myers, Hughes Hronek, and I pretty much run 2 defense pairs, lean on those top 4 for heavy minutes. It all speaks to the Canucks needing an upgrade on defense before the Stanley Cup playoffs. Long way to go there. I am sure they have some irons in the fire. And in fact, it would not surprise me to see a trade for a defenseman in the next few days as rosters are getting set. We are seeing a ton of player transactions around the National Hockey League. As we know, you already have some teams that are probably, if they're honest with themselves, rebuilding this year and not necessarily expecting to compete. You wonder if any of those defensemen are available right now. You wonder if you can just make a good old-fashioned hockey trade with a team that may have surplus defensemen. Perhaps Nils Hoglander fits there.
I know we'll get into the injuries around the NHL later, but most of them are forward injuries. So, if one of these teams all of a sudden has a forward injury upon it, and these are notable injuries from, small S star players to big S star players, maybe you're willing to acquire a forward. Canucks may have a surplus there, and let go of a defenseman in order to put yourself on the right footing to start the season. It's possible.
Let's get to our top story. It's brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits, and Foolish Winery. Finally, realistic line combinations and defense pairings for the season and home opener 1 week from today at Rogers Arena versus the Calgary Flames. Danton Heinen with JT Miller and Brock Besser. Elias Pettersson centering Jake DeBrusk and Daniel Sprong. More on that trio in a second. Today, we see Aatu Räty in the middle between Connor Garland and Nils Hoglander as Pius Suter misses a second consecutive practice. Ratu was the extra guy yesterday, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bluger between Nils Oman and Kiefer Sherwood, Arshdeep Baines skating as the spare forward, Hughes Hronik, Susie Myers, forward Desharnais, Friedman, Juleson. So the defense looking exactly as it did yesterday. Ratu in the Bluger spot between Garland and Hoglander today. Bluger at the center spot with Oman on the wing today are your changes. Beyond Pius Suter's absence, and they described him as banged up and was getting evaluated, so we'll see what more information they provide on the guy who would be their third line center. And then there's Aatu Räty, who is still here, suffered a concussion Saturday in the game against the Calgary Flames preseason. In fact, similar to Guillaume Brisebois last year, you remember he suffered a concussion in preseason. And that could complicate the cap and the roster because Aatu Räty on a one-way contract, you have to account for him if he's injured. You can't just send him down. The other complications, of course, are Dakota Joshua and Thatcher Demko. Where do they fit? Still unknown. Joshua, of course, coming back from testicular cancer. Thatcher Demko with that unique muscle injury to the knee. Still unknown on both players here. Needless to say, with each passing day, it does not look good for either of them to play the season opener. Let's hear from Rick Tocchet, the head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, who acknowledges there are some tough decisions to come, in particular with the young Finnish centerman, Aatu Räty.
Well, yeah, I mean, Rat's centerman takes draws. He's, you look at guys like, can it be sustainable? There's a couple of coverage things he made. Like, that wasn't mistakes. It's stuff that he's going to have to learn. So whether it's here or in Abbots, or, he's making hard decisions. That's the one thing. 2 years ago, there wasn't really hard decisions. Now there are. So you got to credit Jim and Patrick for creating, and RJ, Ryan Johnson, creating some more depth than harder decisions. 2 years ago, I don't think there was many hard decisions.
Sounded to me a little bit like a coach who was prepared to cut the player because of some away from the puck things. Now, still think he could be there. We'll see about Suter and the health and all that. But when he says he's got to learn those things, usually learning is done at the AHL. That's the developmental league. The NHL is about results.
You look at practice today as they are just getting on the ice right now for those watching and listening live. Ratu's getting line rushes with Hoglander and Garland.
Mm-hmm.
Bluger, Baines, Sherwood, and Oman working through the fourth line shifts.
Mm-hmm.
So different than what we saw yesterday at practice,
where Ratu was the extra forward.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
he's really moved up two steps here.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just practice, but it's interesting to see and this is the thing with Ratu, is that it's sort of like he doesn't really work on the fourth line as well. He's a more skilled player.
He also, ice time is important there too.
Yeah.
Right. Like 8 minutes a night is not going to,
as a 21-year-old player,
right.
That's not perfect. Guys like Baines, who are 3 years older, you can stomach it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, let's hear from the young Finn on being coached by Rick Tocchet.
I think it's tough, but it's fair. I think if you just try your best and work hard, I think it's and like play an honest game. I think it's gonna be good. But yeah, you got to work hard. But I think it's good in that way. Like he'll give you pointers and stuff. But at the end of the day, like he's looking out for you and for everyone.
He says a lot of words twice.
Well, his English is
going very good.
Yeah, he's doing very well with that.
Okay, so that's Ratu's bid to make the lineup or the roster. We have talked about that. Let's matriculate to Daniel Sprong here, because I think yesterday's practice, and again where he is back with Pettersson and DeBrusk
today as well. Yes.
Yes, both days here. Suggest they would like to see him there. That they are hoping he can leapfrog Hoglander and be, produce the same offensively as Hoglander did in terms of goals, but also as a right shot, maybe bring even more to the table. Look, we all wondered about whether Daniel Sprong could be a Rick Tocchet type of player. Patrick Alvin and others, Tocchet himself, very honest that this is a player who needs some work, who we need to work with, who we need to help, but there is some tantalizing upside there. Let's hear from the coach on Daniel Sprong and his ability to stick on that second line with Pettersson and DeBrusk.
I've liked his camp so far. He's, we've still got a ways to go, coverages, things like that. But he's done a nice job in the sense he hasn't been on the ice where he's given up grade A's. I've seen him really diligently trying to understand. He's always asking questions. I think there's a lot of potential there, and if him and Petey and Jake and if they can stay together, and it could be a damn good line for us. But they got to make sure that they play inside and they come up with loose pucks too. It can't be all perimeter hockey, and that's why me and Sprong are talking about that today.
Yeah, and as always, Coach lays it on out there. He's not a Selke guy. He's never going to be a Selke guy. He is diligently trying to learn the coverages and make sure he's in good defensive position. But it's not just the defensive side of the puck. With Sprong and Pettersson, you need players who are going to play on the inside, play in the dirty areas, reduce that distance to the goal, because as good a shooters as they both are, it's very hard to score goals from distance in the National Hockey League. And, of course, puck retrieval on the forecheck, which is a big part of Rick Tocchet hockey.
It's great that he's interested, because I think that there's the risk with a player like this, a project, an outlier kind of player who's bounced around, that it's just going to be more of the same from the player. We have been told, there were reports that the light bulb's gone off there, that he's realized his lot in life in the NHL, having been left unsigned throughout the summer, through most of the summer at the very least, that he's figured it out. Okay, I'm going to have to do things differently going forward in my career if I want to stick in the National Hockey League. It sounds like that's true. The truth is, Matt, we're just not going to know until he's played a bunch of games. Like the proof is ultimately going to be in the pudding here.
Unlike Ratu, this is not a guy who, you send him back to the AHL, have him work on his game, then call him back up when you need a forward.
That's not this guy.
This is a guy who needs to do it now,
Yeah.
right? Like, this is a guy who's bounced around a number of NHL organizations. There have been attitudinal issues. There have been issues of only playing the offensive side of the puck. So, can he figure it out? Is he sensing a little bit of fear of loss here with his NHL career if it doesn't work out here in Vancouver? You got to give him credit. He does produce, and he certainly produces.
Matt, he should be pinching himself. Has he ever lined up with players of DeBrusk and Pettersson's?
Absolutely.
Ilk?
Remember years ago, in a moment of frustration, Mike Gillis saying that he was going to go down to the dressing room after a game and go to Taylor Pyatt. You remember Pyatt playing with the Twins and saying, "Son, do you understand the opportunity you've been given here?"
Yes.
Because one of these things is not like the other in terms of that line composition. And I think some of that applies here to Daniel Sprong. Boy, kid, Elias Pettersson, Jake DeBrusk, bona fide NHL scorers, in Pettersson's case, an all-star. It's never going to get any better than this in terms of real estate.
He may have accidentally been out there at the same time as Sidney Crosby in his time with the Penguins.
I'm sure he pulled
Alex
certain
Ovechkin,
shifts with those sorts of guys at different times.
But he's been given the keys to this line here for now.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to throw the keys back, or are you going to, run with it?
I want to shout out listener Jeff on the YouTube chat yesterday. Actually, before we do that, what are our friends at Yellow Dog up to?
Well, another seasonal brew from Neighborhood Brewing. They're so good with the seasonals. The Dark Magic horchata milk stout. I'm going to get it right this time. The horchata milk stout, sweetened with a touch of lactose and vanilla, and then kicked up a notch with a pinch of cinnamon goodness. Spellbinding concoction, they say. Can't wait. It's now officially on tap and ready to go at Neighborhood Brewery.
Try those Freezy vodka soda mix packs as well. Cream soda, blue raspberry, grape. Great combo. Listener Jeff, for been trying to move away from this whole habits die hard, but audience member Jeff, because he's more than just a listener, he was watching on YouTube. Yesterday said to us, guys, what do you think about the Canucks players on waivers? He thought there was a halfway decent chance that Jiri Patera would get claimed and wondered about Phil DiGiuseppe. We poo-pooed Patera, but did acknowledge that maybe DiGiuseppe. Well,
the opposite has occurred.
Yeah. Well done, Jeff. Tell us we're wrong. Patera claimed today by the Boston Bruins, who, of course, have the drama in the crease with Jeremy Swayman still not under contract. Cam Neely kicks the Hornets' nest this week. The Maple Ridge guy and president of the Bruins, former Vancouver Canuck, talking about $64 million. The agent, of course, with the statement that will take a few days to digest this and go from here. It seems like there is bad blood between Swayman and the Bruins now, and they are preparing for starting life without Jeremy Swayman with Jonas Korpisalo and perhaps Jiri Patera. And as your two goals.
That's a power move by the Bruins. We're bringing in another goalie. How serious are we about the lines we've drawn in the sand? We're going to get another goalie.
Yep.
Jeremy. So
well, they have no choice. I mean, it's kind of like the Canucks with Lankinen. Like, can you really just go out there and trot these two guys out if you're expecting to win? No, you got to be honest with yourself and say we got to do better than that. And Patera's actually a step up for them. So there saw a lot of consternation when the Canucks signed Lankinen. Oh, what does this mean for Tolopilo? Patera must be pissed. He just signed here. The feelings of AHL goaltenders cannot govern how you structure an NHL roster.
But he's probably feeling a whole lot better about his long life now.
I think both of them, Tolopilo and Patera, feel great about this. In Patera's case, he may very well get a chance to start in the NHL. In Tolopilo's case, he knows he's going to get a chance to run with the starter's job in Abbotsford until there is some movement on the Thatcher Demko file.
And even when everything comes to pass and the Canucks get Demko back, whomever gets sent down to the AHL, at worst, it's going to be a 50-50 scenario because they're going to want to develop Tolopilo still. So under the previous, there was a world in which Tolopilo was in the ECHL. That was a real risk for Nikita Tolopilo, but now it looks like, I mean, unless they go and acquire another goalie, I would suspect he's going to get his, a regular dose of AHL hockey at the very least.
JT Miller, who is scheduled to play this Friday in the preseason finale against Edmonton. Reporters caught up with him at practice yesterday, and look, very few people were sweating this. It was just
he was practicing regularly, so there was no reason to sweat
and unusual than it was anything else. Miller clarified why he hasn't played a preseason game yet. Take a listen.
Kind of been taking care of something and not forcing it. We've had a luxury of having some time over the last 2 weeks, so I just trying to be smart. Should be good to go Friday.
Did you tweak something?
I've just been taking care of myself and not forcing it, and I'll be ready to go Friday. That's me being about as honest as I can.
Yeah, so something bothering him.
So there's a little something there. He was also asked about finishing second in the fitness training this past year and asked if, like there was a big uptick in fitness. And he went, no, I came in last year in good shape too. We just didn't proclaim where I finished in camp.
Didn't trot around with the medal around his neck.
Yes. And look, here's the thing, everybody. If you're wondering why precaution has been the order of the day with Vancouver Canucks and JT Miller, and that's what Frank Saravelli told us yesterday, that, look, this is just out of abundance of caution, nothing else. Take a look what happened last night in preseason play. Brady Tkachuk Tim Stützle and Thomas Chabot of the Ottawa Senators all leave the game. Vancouver's Macklin Celebrini, a first overall pick, leaves the game for the San Jose Sharks. Artemi Panarin of the New York Rangers leaves the game. And of course, we've already seen the carnage in Montreal with Laine and Reinbacher knee injuries. Drew Doughty, that ankle injury. Ryan Lindgren, fine defenseman with the New York Rangers, have all already been hurt in preseason games.
Yeah. Yeah, like stars of the game here.
Oh,
brand
I mean, that
names.
could scuttle the Senators' season before it starts, Blake, if Tkachuk, Stützle, and Chabot are missing extended periods of time. These are two best forwards and one of your top defensemen.
Now, Reinbacher and Laine, we already know the fate of them, and it's bad.
Doughty, too.
Yes, all three of those. Let's hope that what we're talking about, those teams are acting on as well, that, you know, they're not serious injuries, but because there's still a week to go in preseason, they're just saying, forget it. You're not going back in this game. And for Brady Tkachuk, by all accounts, he got injured avenging Tim Stützle, right? So, I mean, again,
after, I mean, that was just a horrible hit.
Horrible hit. Jekai for the second straight game getting ejected.
Yeah. Well, and ejected the previous game because he went to seek vengeance on the Maple Leafs farmhand who hit Patrick Laine, and the guy wouldn't fight him.
Yeah.
So he's chasing him around the ice. And look, he's in a battle to be a Canadians in the lineup defenseman this season. They've got some depth there, some younger guys who are all vying. So you can understand why he goes, oh, this is my role. I've got to go out and perform this. Otherwise, I might be in the press box for the season opener or beyond. But there are limits and merits. I mean, you want to deliver a clean open ice hit, by all means. You want to go head hunting?
Well, and
on a guy in preseason, as he did with Stützle, that is beyond the pale.
Well, and Ridley Gregg on Kirby Dach as well, which was I mean, both Gregg on Dach and Jekai on Stützle. I mean, they are blatant interference calls. Puck is long gone. Like, come on. Predatory hits in the preseason. And I saw, forget who it was, apologize to the commenter, one of our colleagues in the media, saying the other thing that we need to get out of here is interdivisional games. Now, part of the thing on the preseason is nobody wants to travel far, right? So
Correct.
that's generally why they're divisional games. But the commenter's point was these teams already hate each other, right? Like, and the minute you put, division rivals who see already a lot of each other, it's a bit like red meat in front of the Lions. So, Ottawa and Montreal are kind of playing. Not playoff intensity, but you know what I mean.
And particularly with divisional playoffs now, right?
Yeah.
That if you were coming out of a playoff series like Edmonton, Vancouver, could it get spicy on Friday? Could. I'm sure there are certain guys in each room who have a grudge to carry over from last year.
But I think teams are more than willing to take the risk there at the convenience of lack of travel for the
good news here is as the Board of Governors met in New York yesterday, Bettman came out and did acknowledge that a reduction of the preseason schedule down to 4 games with a increase in the regular season schedule to 84 games is something that is very much on the table for the new CBA. So a couple years from now, we could be looking at a decrease in these preseason games. Thank goodness.
And let's hope that all those players that are on the sideline, outside of the guys that we already know the fate of, let's hope they get back and that the 1 week is going to be enough to get them back in the lineup.
So question for you as we get back to the Vancouver Canucks lineup and their practice lines. Read the piece that Ben Kuzma of the Province and Post Media did today with Connor Garland, or off yesterday's skate. And Garland, talked about wanting to get back together with Dakota Joshua, Teddy Bluger, the meat and potatoes line from last year, one of the best third lines in hockey for a big stretch of the season. They were terrific. But is it a fait accompli that he's going to be on the third line if Sprong can't hack this second line duty we've outlined? Like, who's more likely there, Hoglander or Garland? I mean, I almost wonder whether if Sprong fails there, whether Garland is the play, at the very least, until Joshua gets back, if you want to put those two back together. But I still wonder whether there's an open competition there. And Garland outlines his route to the National Hockey League with Coos. He said he became an NHL player because he had a fantastic preseason. He was the first call-up after that preseason. He never went back down. And he even talked about how Tocchet had to check him as his head coach in Arizona, because you remember Garland came from the Coyotes and Tocchet coached the Coyotes. But his cockiness after a 22-goal year. He said, yeah, coach had to put me back in line.
Well, he was
so there's a long history there between Connor Garland and Rick Tocchet. And I do wonder if the Sprong experiment doesn't work, is that knee-jerk reflexive just put Hoglander back on that line, or if Garland has the opportunity for a battlefield promotion here.
Both are possibilities. Here's going to be, to me, what makes or breaks this current line, and then who gets the call up is puck retrieval. Is Jake DeBrusk doing enough puck retrieval that role is there and taken care of on that line? Because if not, if he's just fancying himself more of an offensive contributor now alongside Elias Pettersson, and you know what, there might be a case to be made that should be his bigger, that's his better asset, is scoring goals than it is puck retrieval. Then they might need, because Daniel Sprong's not a puck retrieval. So do they need somebody? And both those guys actually fit the bill. You could argue that Hoglander or Garland fit that bill. But in terms of stealing that job from Sprong, if they just look at this and say there's three guys that all want the puck on their stick, somebody needs to go get it first. They might just need to sacrifice Sprong for the greater good of the line.
And you're right about both guys can get that job done, although albeit in different fashions. Like I would think that on just purely on retrievals and spade work and board work, that Hoglander is right there with Garland. But I would argue that once you have retrieved the puck, making a good decision with it and being able to set up a teammate or put it in an area where a teammate can take advantage, I think I'd prefer Garland there to Hoglander. As we know, Hoglander, not much of a creator, playmaker, setup guy. Number of times last year where you sat there and watched Connor Garland do great spade work and get the puck to Joshua in a closed area, short spaces by the goal where it was finished off. So that's why I bring this up. We all love Nils Hoglander and the story, the 24 goals. But it was pretty clear through now a second head coach, because Boudreau wasn't his biggest champion either, that Tocchet and this staff feel there's more work to be done there, and particularly as a defensive player. So
but you also need offense on all three lines, and 24.
Well, and that's it too.
24 even strength goals is going to look great on your third line.
But here's the thing, Blake. Hoglander with Bluger, can he get to 20-some goals with Bluger? Or
tell me who's the third guy.
I guess Suter would be the guy if and when he comes back here. But if you somehow neuter the offensive capabilities of Nils Hoglander's line mates, then are you looking at a 24-goal scorer? And if not, can he be a better defensive player, be a more holistic player? And then beyond that, do you need to make a move there before some of the value goes out of the player? Because there's part of me that's just sitting here waiting on a Nils Hoglander for a defenseman trade. And I would not be shocked if that went down in the next 5 days before the roster is all buttoned up.
That's certainly a possibility.
Not a likelihood by any stretch. Don't anyone run with that, but
do you go with
would not be surprised.
Third line, remember, you have to throw out the old definition of a third line of being a grinding line. It doesn't have to be that at all anymore. You can have that.
The trend is to more, having more of a top 9 offensive.
Right. And so how about Hoglander, Ratu, and Sprong if Sprong doesn't work on the second line?
Yeah. Or Suter.
Yeah.
And Sprong. Yeah.
I mean, those are more offensive lines, and with Suter defensive conscious.
I think I'd wince a little bit about your defensive capabilities on the flanks there with Hoglander and Sprong. But
you put them in positions to succeed. I mean,
Well, and all of this is a roundabout way of getting to say, is there just a little too much redundancy between Hoglander and Sprong? Are they just too similar?
Oh, I don't think they're
Of
similar
players.
players. Well, one's a puck retrieval grinder. One is the opposite of that. One is a put me on
No,
the
but
tops of
they're-
the circles
but
and
they're both-
create.
Well, yes, but they're both guys who probably have to be sheltered a little defensively.
Yeah, I guess they have that in common. But
And they both rely on other players to get them the puck. So, anyways, we'll see how it plays out.
you don't think Hoglander's a puck retrieval guy? He's a grind in the corner kind of guy, puck battle guy.
Yeah, but he's the 24 goals in a lot of cases were because he's playing with Elias Pettersson, who's getting on the puck in good areas.
Right, he's not a setup guy.
Yeah,
if that's what you mean, yes. But
Yeah.
he can go get the puck at the very least, cycle it around, then get into
yeah.
these
I mean,
traffic
they all
areas.
have their moments, but anyways, we'll see. The great thing about signing all these wingers in the postseason, in the offseason, as the Canucks did, was you have all different combinations available to you, and they're coming into a little bit of a clearer focus here.
When circling back to him, because he's on this list to what we were talking about, he is a healthy guy that does have availability as one of his strengths. He was one of those guys that played over 80 games last year for the Vancouver Canucks, and that's going to come in handy with guys that haven't necessarily been available. And as we think back to what we were just talking about the players all going down with injury, they had a marvelous list of durable players last year, and Hoglander's one of those durable players, and they've got some forwards that have already gone down this year and may not be available for the rest of this year. So you have to take that into consideration as well.
Before we move on, is if there's anything from the folks, we're going to try and incorporate you more in this segment on the YouTube stream. So if you have thoughts, comments, feel free, type away. We're going to be on the lookout for some of them and hoping to bring each and every day a comment or two from the live audience here to this segment. I want to move on here to a couple of things around the National Hockey League, and maybe we can circle back if we see something from the commenters. The Columbus Blue Jackets have been given special dispensation on the not salary cap, but salary floor. And this, of course, the extraordinary and devastating circumstances of losing Johnny Gaudreau. He was set to make $9.75 million for the Columbus Blue Jackets this year. And as we know, other than signing Johnny Gaudreau, the Jackets have not been a particularly big spender over the years, tend to be a little closer to the floor than the ceiling. And of course, as do most teams that finish towards the bottom of the NHL standings, where the Blue Jackets have been far too often in their history. So there's no timeline on this. Bill Daley was saying at the governor's meetings, at some point, needless to say, they're going to want to encourage the Columbus Blue Jackets to get to the floor. I saw Aaron Portline, the fine hockey writer there in Columbus. He was wondering about Phil DiGiuseppe for them because they're looking for veteran forwards. So there may well be a scenario at play here where Don Waddell is not just going to go out and add a player for the sake of getting to the floor, because he does have some cushion there. But clearly the clock is ticking there. NHL is not going to allow that to go on in
Not till Christmas.
No, not in perpetuity. So we had wondered last week with John Shannon, I believe, with Arizona now in Utah, everybody's favorite dumping ground is now gone.
What?
So were there any teams right off the hop that were looking to take on bad money? And we have asked that in particular because of Tucker Poolman and whether the Vancouver Canucks, in setting their roster for opening night, can find a taker for Poolman and the $2.5 million he's owed in a season that he will not be playing hockey, in order to give the Canucks a little bit more cap space, avoid the need to go into LTIR, and begin accruing some cap space for in-season additions.
I also wonder if Don Waddell feels any sort of responsibility of maybe making sure the Columbus Blue Jackets aren't a laughing stock of a team this year, because it would be pretty tough on Blue Jackets fans to lose a star like Johnny Gaudreau, as tragically as they did, and then to see their team mired in the basement all season long.
Well, Blake, I mean,
like, does he not owe it to them to invest a little bit, get above the cap floor, certainly, and give them something to cheer on, give them some happiness this year?
Well, couple of things there. You know, the stock line would be it couldn't get any worse than the beginning last year, where Babcock gets fired, Pascal,
the
Vincent
calamity
comes
of
in.
that, yes.
Yeah, and they're just a laughing stock. The owner's out there putting out statements that he's unhappy, and needless to say, that ultimately cost Jarmo Kekalainen and John Davidson their positions there. But of course, this is a whole other realm when we talk about terrible starts to a season, to, have to gather at a training camp, knowing somebody who brought so much joy, both with his play and with his personality, is not there and is never coming back. And just the grief and Sean Monahan is one of his closest friends going back to their Calgary days. They brought Monahan in particular, specifically to play with Johnny Gaudreau and reunite those guys. So look, it's actually a decent collection of young players there in Columbus. I mean, you take a look at it, and Cole Sillinger, Kent Johnson, of course, Lower Mainlander.
Marchenko's a nice player.
Marchenko, Chinnikov, like they're Fantilli, of course, who's got incredible potential.
Don't give up on Kent Johnson.
Voronkov, like they've got a number of good young forwards, couple of good young defensemen too there. David Juracek, a first-round pick. Did Matejchuk get sent down? Have they sent him back down? But he's another first-round pick. So, I think the whole notion was they were going to get a little better this year, that they were going to be vying a little bit more competitively for playoff spots. Well, alas, that may not happen. So, yeah, we'll see how selective Waddell is in terms of this unusual, this irregular circumstance that he finds himself in, having to add a player by a certain time, but not necessarily working against a deadline, or at least not one that is publicly known. The other thing that we should know, a few other things that we should know from the Board of Governors meetings yesterday, where Bettman says the cap could increase up to $92.5 million for next year. It's at 88 this year. As Puckpedia reports, the max 5% increase, as outlined in the CBA Memorandum of Understanding, would bring the cap to $92.4 million. 92.5 is a 5.1% increase. So the rosy, optimistic view right now is that revenues will be up to exceed, so that the cap can exceed even the max threshold, rounding it up, which is what they did this year. Now, Gary made sure to point out this is a very, very preliminary projection. And so we do have some hoops to jump through before we get there. But of course, Blake, this could be particularly helpful for the Vancouver Canucks, who next year have to suck on that Oliver Ekman-Larsson buyout. And we told you last year when they executed that buyout that it was really a no-brainer because of the massive immediate cap savings they were getting in year one. In year two, so this coming season, it was also advantageous to the Canucks. It's a $2.3 million cap hit, which is not great for dead money, but a whole lot better than what they would have had to pay him. Well, next year, the pain really comes, right? The $4.7 million dead cap hit. So I have to imagine that was music to the ears of Jim Rutherford, Patrick Calvin, if not Francesco Aquilini as well, that they would have even more cushion next year against that OEL buyout. And they're turning out, it was clearly the right move last year. I know OEL played pretty well. down in Florida and won a cup, right? Like, it worked out for him, but it also worked out for the Vancouver Canucks to make a huge jump up the standings as they did, and see the cap go up to further cushion.
And the Canucks don't have many holes next year. You know, they got Brock Besser to deal with.
Yep.
And that's the only thing of serious import. Like, it's Pius Suter, Daniel Sprong, and Nils Hoglander are the only other real players of note. And that's easy business to do if you're the Vancouver Canucks. So, you know, they could come out of this relatively unscathed, especially if they happen to get another bump for 26-27.
Oh, for sure. And you would anticipate they would. Now that'll be a new CBA. And that was the other note from Commissioner Bettman yesterday, that he wants to start CBA talks in January. And he said, look, got a good rapport with Marty Walsh, the new head of the NHLPA. I don't want to box him into anything. I know he's on his tour, going through. Union Head always goes through all the markets early on in the season, checks in with the player reps and the players, what's important to them. But that sounds like a very realistic, soft target date to start CBA negotiations. You will have, of course, the entirety of this year and into next season if you need that. We have seen these two sides work to deadlines in the past. In fact, we've seen the owners and Bettman not only work to a deadline, but work beyond it to the point where they've had to cancel games and even a season. The only major North American sports league to cancel a season because of a labor disruption and not award their championship. But reading between the lines, as one always must do with Gary, that tells me that the owners have a pretty good comfort level with the CBA they've been operating on. And you'll remember they did this CBA during the pandemic because they needed to, with all those lost revenues and everything that was going on financially in the world those days. You wonder if they cut up the pizza a little bit differently and the cap even makes a more Herculean jump. It could. I mean, you certainly see some of the more vocal player agents like Alan Walsh sitting there and comparing the comparatively speaking small jumps in salaries for NHL top players in comparison to their brethren in other sports, where the money in the NBA and the NFL has just gotten lunatic. Well, given the franchise values here are pretty good still. With no cap. Yeah, baseball with no cap, of course, long ago, those salaries started to get. Well, somebody had just mentioned recently, Bettman or Daly said something to the effect of, if the Toronto Maple Leafs were put up for sale right now, it wouldn't go for a penny under $5 or $6 billion. Yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, well, so where should be? Hey, I would push back on that and say, well, what did Rogers pay? It was $6 billion for an additional 37.5%, but that includes the Raptors, TFC, Argos, and the minor league teams. So you would be able to work back from that number and get a good estimate. Because of course Gary and Bill are always going to inflate the value of all their franchise. I mean, hell, they wanted $1 billion for the Ottawa Senators at this point last year, and nobody was willing to pay it. What did the LA Clippers sell for way back to Steve Ballmer? It was $2 billion. Wasn't that $2 billion? And we were like jaw on the floor. Jaw on the floor. My goodness. And take a look where the franchise values have gone since then. And frankly, Steve Ballmer had a big inflationary effect on them. Probably the former Microsoft chief spending that kind of money on the second basketball team in LA. But again, like baseball, football, basketball are really good businesses in the United States. And in fact, the basketball is a really good business the world over now. There are massive audiences in India, China, some of the bigger population centers. Basketball is a truly global game in terms of where it's played. Hockey is not that. And it's not like hockey ratings are blowing anything else away. Which really makes you then wonder, why are you evaluated? I mean, I saw a tweet yesterday about, WNBA ratings have plummeted since Caitlin Clark and her Indiana Fever were eliminated from the postseason. And that's right. I mean, those Indiana Fever games were doing more than 2 million. But, the ratings of the recent games were in around 1 million people, which is roughly what NHL games do for the NH on American.
It makes you
television.
wonder why the valuations are what they are for franchises, because if you don't have the global economy that the other sports do,
right?
How do you make the claim that that's what it's worth?
I mean, you need growth domestically,
and there's some. It's not crazy,
some,
though.
but it's not. No, quite right. Not crazy in the least. But at the end of the day, there's a finite number of these things, and we've seen the gap between rich and poor grow, particularly in the United States. You got a lot of billionaires there now. They don't come up for sale very often, and if you want one, you got to buck up. Plain and simple. So, yeah, all of this is to say, I sure hope we're not staring down the barrel of another season interruption a couple years from now because the owners need a few extra nickels in their jeans. And I would hope, although I doubt Gary would ever say this publicly, where even the guys who are losing money, and there would be NHL teams that lose money, or at least on a pure profit, at least on a pure revenue in, revenue and expenditures out proposition, I would hope that Gary talks to them and says, look, like, if you are so desperate for the liquidity that you're sweating these sorts of losses year in, year out, I will remind you that when you sell your franchise, you are going to get several times over what you paid for it because of what has happened to the value of sports.
Or if you can't handle it, sell the team.
Yeah, or that's the other thing.
Sell the damn team.
Yeah, if the pockets aren't deep enough, sell the damn team. I think we learned this in Arizona this past summer, right, with the Coyotes owner.
By the way, good news out of San Jose. Macklin Celebrini apparently day-to-day lower body injury.
It'd be awful if that's how he had to start his first NHL season on the sidelines. Lastly, Blake, despite the media hysteria, expansion was not an agenda item for the Board of Governors. So,
well, I've been very suspicious of this. Like, of course, they are looking at some level of it, but
like, it's like heroin; it's free money for them. So, of course,
and I know you say that a lot, but at the same time, this seems like it has been completely generated by somebody in the back channels. They're like all these scoops that Buccigross and Kevin Weeks have been putting forth. Like,
well, no, there as John Shannon still there are groups in Atlanta that are looking at bringing NHL hockey back there for a third time. There has been interest from Mr. Fertitta, the owner of the Houston Rockets, in the Texas city.
But those leaks are not coming from the league. Those are ownership groups putting those leaks into the reporters' hands and saying, listen, we're going to make a push. Talk about this.
Well, but if enough owners are, and Blake, some of these owners may just be addicted to expansion revenue now.
Maybe. It's a handout check every once in a while.
And they don't have to share it with the players.
But my bigger point is, Matt,
that's the best part for them.
It's not that Gary is, I don't think, actively trolling for this expansion. The expansion is coming to him.
I think Gary has recognized that they have expanded to capacity or thereabouts right now. So let's not rush our fences. But I think absolutely they plan to add a couple more teams
to be the biggest
by the end of the decade.
By
the end of the decade, I suspect they will have, if not 2 additional teams, then announcements of 2 other teams coming.
And maybe the topic we just talked about dovetails into this, in that if you can't be a fully global property, do you owe it to yourself to juice every mile of North America?
That's it. And then the other thing, Blake, is like Atlanta and Houston are really big markets in the U.S. and you're not in them.
Yeah.
And then you have the unique test case that we're seeing with Utah, which is not a big market, but maybe an underserved sports market. And you might have hay to gain there as well. Could you put a team in Milwaukee one day? Could you put one in the Dakotas and make it a regional team? We know how much they love their college hockey there. So I suspect the NHL is looking at all of these scenarios because of the revenues it can generate for their board of governors. I mean, expansion to the NHL, it kind of reminds me of, when provincial governments, like, they have no ideas to grow revenues. They don't want to tax you because that's toxic politically. So they just build casinos everywhere. Expansion is kind of like casinos for a provincial government. Yeah. Just drop a casino there.
Generate a bunch of income.
Generate a whole bunch of money that we didn't have before. It's brilliant. Let's do it. Let's get to today's menu, brought to you by Greta. And look, hockey season on the verge here, but even before it gets going, all that baseball this week, wow, you're front-to-back baseball you could watch this week. Football, soccer, and of course, when hockey season does get going, Greta, great spot for games home and away. We're going to be there October 19th. For a Canucks Army viewing party, and we'll have more of those throughout the season. More details coming. Minutes from the arena, come by, pregame, postgame. Check out the great street food menu of the Smash Burger. Games in the arcade, weekly drink specials. Greta, the place to be, 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar. Let the games begin. We'll talk to Patrick Johnston here in a moment. Normally a Thursday guy for us, but we've had to rejig the lineup this week with no show on the Truth and Reconciliation holiday Monday. And next week, actually, there will be a few other little changes to the show as we kick off the regular season and finalize our guest lineup. We still have another guest, regular guest, who's going to be joining us or rejoining us that we haven't announced, not to mention some changes on the day-to-day of the show, particularly the podcast. So be looking for that. Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects going to join us as well. Great insight on Aatu Räty, Arshdeep Bains, Kirill Kudryavtsev, and some of the other Canucks, young Canucks, who have shown so very well here through Young Stars training camp and preseason. Time now for a Bet365.
Before you get there, unlike JD Vance, we welcome fact checking. Dan on YouTube, Matt, didn't the 94 World Series also not get played? You said the only sports league to not award its a full season. But yes, no, quite right. Yeah.
Yes. The players went on strike in 94, scuttling the World Series and probably killing baseball in Montreal.
Yeah.
In the case of the National Hockey League, they scuttled the entirety of the season. And it was premeditated too, right? Like Gary and the owners were all in lockstep on that.
I wonder if they.
But yes, if my language there wasn't precise enough, good catch.
I wonder if the players also scuttled the World Series because they just thought Montreal's going to win the World Series. That doesn't matter.
Well, the only problem there was the Yankees were the best team in the AL, and in '94 they were really desperate for a World Series in New York, of course, because they hadn't won since the '70s.
Jeter and company had
they had gone through the crazy years of George and
Yes.
Billy Martin and everything else that was going on with that franchise at the time. Bet365 segment presentation thereof, proud partners of Securus and Price. I did this last week with Hamilton getting a touchdown, and it was successful, so I'm going back to the well. I just have trouble laying points with the BC Lions right now, particularly more than a touchdown. That's just a dicey proposition. They seem like a fragile club. And so I'm going to take the visiting Stampeders plus 7.5. You know, I love taking more than a touchdown. So it's 7.5 right now to take the Stampeders Friday at BC Place against the Lions, and I'm going to go there.
It's just a good bet. I hate to say it, but it is, given the current state of affairs for that team. I'm looking at the Thursday nighter in the NFL, and I get points for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
So I'll take that. Thank you. It's only 1.5, but it's something for a 3-1 Bucks team against an overachieving Falcons team at 2-2, I think. So I'll take that and run.
You're not going money line then? You think the 1.5 is going to be important? What's the money line? Tampa plus 105?
Yeah,
you can save the juice.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay.
All right. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS when opening that account. Patrick Johnston coming up next.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and Air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Grenoble YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Sick Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center, and this next interview brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians. Thanking Seas fans for another great season at the Nat. If you're looking to guarantee your seat for the 2025 season, please visit CanadiansBaseball.com or call 604-872-5232. Joining us today, day early than normal, is Patrick Johnston of the Province and Post Media, Canucks beat writer. Thank you for your flexibility on the schedule, sir.
I just couldn't wait, Matt. I was excited to be here.
Well,
So
we
many
can't wait to have
takes.
you either.
So many takes to unveil.
Ready,
Ready, go.
So
No.
So we saw at practice yesterday something that could very well resemble the opening night lineup a week from today against the Calgary Flames. Who is beeping on the phone?
I don't know why my computer's doing this. I'll turn it off. I don't know what it's doing. It's just
Let's
my computer
restart.
is out of
No.
my computer's out of control. Sorry, guys. I don't know why
All
it's got all the noises on.
Okay,
I'm
we'll
sorry.
start again.
Yeah.
We'll start over. Blake
Yeah.
wants to start over. Could have been a funny bit. But
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Sick Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center, and joined now by Elite Prospects Cam Robinson, who typically is the Tuesday guy for us. So thank you for being flexible schedule-wise today, Cam.
Yeah.
We have a developing situation with Aatu Räty, and we've talked a little bit about him here over the last few weeks, going back to Young Stars. But he survives through the cuts yesterday, as does Archie Baines. We'll ask you about him in a second. And now looks like he's got a realistic shot to make this roster, if not this lineup, depending on the health and return to play for Dakota Joshua, now Pius Suter, who's sitting out as well. What's been different about Ratu this season compared to the guy we saw last year with the Abbey Canucks?
Well, I think the obvious thing is the foot speed, is that it's been an issue for him forever. Like going back to his 16-year-old season, even when he was projected to be a really, really high pick, it was like, if the feet get there. And then, I heard him, he had that quote where he's like, I had like a light bulb go off this summer where it's like, I needed to get faster. First of all, I thought, I'm like, the light bulb just went off now. But regardless of that, is that, he obviously put in some focused work in improving that area of his game, because that needed to happen. And it's happened. He looks quicker. He looks stronger. I think the details of his game have really impressed the coaching staff. His face-off acumen being always on his strong side somehow. It's really beneficial, especially on a team that's light on right-handed centers. So he's kind of bringing a little bit of everything to the table. And, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I said that, he's having a great camp. He had a great Young Stars, but I didn't think he was realistically going to beat some of these veterans out for a job. And now to see Di Giuseppe on waivers, like, that's an NHL player, right? He's already beaten one NHL player. And the same for Baines. Surprising to see Baines outkick Di Giuseppe as well. But he's done basically everything he can do to earn himself a roster spot. And it's just going to come down to numbers, I think, too, right? With Suter out, that gives him another opportunity. Teddy Bluger's back skating, so we'll see how that goes. I saw that he was lining up in the middle on that third line, and that's where Ratu had been playing primarily this preseason. So I don't think he's there yet. The expectation in my mind is that it would probably be better to have him playing first line minutes in the farm than playing as your 13th forward in the bigs, but we'll have to see.
Well, answer me this. Do you think he's better than Oman or Bluger right now?
I think he's better than Oman. I do. But Nils Oman is a player that you don't feel bad having as your 13th guy, I would say, is because you're not really trying to develop him into much more than he already is. So if he's watching from the press box a ton, that's unfortunate for him, but it's not really hindering the long-term value for the organization. Whereas Ratu, it's like I'm sure they hope that one day he could be like a legitimate 3C or maybe even like a tweener top 6 guy. So to get him all those minutes down in the farm, if you can, would be more beneficial. But I do think he's ahead of Oman. And then Teddy Bluger, Bluger is more of a pro. You know, he's more refined. He's used to playing on that line with Garland. And when Joshua comes back, and they were excellent, you know, for long stretches last year. So I would probably give him the edge over Ratu at this point.
None of those stretches are late, though. I mean, it was lightning in a bottle, but, you know, Teddy Bluger's very limited offensively. Otherwise, Teddy Bluger would have been more than Teddy Bluger by the time he arrives in Vancouver. But I think one of the reasons why Ratu didn't have that light bulb go off earlier is he was always making some sort of traction in his career. I mean, he played 12 games as a 19-year-old in this league. You know, I think he always saw himself moving forward, albeit at a slower pace and a flatter curve than we anticipated when he was 16. But I think he always saw, and I think he finally saw himself hitting that full plateau in his career last year where he's like, why isn't it going better for me? And to me, this is great news. He is still, as we speak, 21 years of age. Guys, if he just arrived, landed in the Canucks lap yesterday, and this was our first look at Aatu Räty as a 21-year-old in camp, people would be going crazy over this player. I think it's just we know his history, and so it's a little bit more muted. But he is 3 years younger, you know, almost 3 years younger than guys like Sasson and other. I mean, there's still plenty of room for this guy. You talked about him being that tweener. I think that's absolutely on the menu here. He's 21 years of age.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And comparing him to Max Sasson or any of those players that they are nearly capped, right? We know what they are. We don't know what he is. And I think you're absolutely right that it's really easy to look at Ratu and be surprised that he's only 21 years old because he's been on the radar for so long, and his career has taken such an, you know, undulous kind of route. Is that started out so high and then really struggled and then popped as a draft point of game player in the Liga, making the NHL for a handful of games at 19, back down to the AHL. And so it's really been a roller coaster for him, but you're absolutely right. Now we're starting to see that development go up in the right direction, and the foot speed, it's everything. And like I mentioned, the details of getting some of that pro level details in his game at the AHL level. And now we're seeing them migrate up to the NHL level, preseason granted, but that they're useful bits. And all those things are going to come together to make him a reliable bottom six player. And hopefully that'll allow him the opportunity to play in that spot and then kind of unearth some of his offensive potential as well and see if he can't get up into that top six kind of zone when he's in his prime.
Cam, help me out from a scouting perspective with skating. And of course, the Exhibit A here in Vancouver is Bo Horvat. The comment from Willie Desjardins, the famous one, you know, boy, when I saw skating the first time, I thought this was going to be a problem. And then the next thing you know, Bo Horvat was one of the better skaters on the team. Can some guys improve and other guys just can't, that they're anchored, so to speak? And how does one improve it? Does one go find Barb Underhill or one of these skating coaches and work with them? Is there off ice ability to improve skating? Take me through how a player improves their skating and why some guys can while others can't.
So those who can't, there are some people that have physical limitations to literally their body. And so I think about Cody Hodgson as a Vancouver kind of comparable, is that he had a really short, his legs were quite short. And so he couldn't generate a really lengthy, powerful stride. But for everybody who doesn't have like an actual physical limitation that could hinder that, I think that everybody can improve their skating. Now, not everyone's going to be Connor McDavid or Nate McKinnon, but you can get to an NHL level if you're talented enough through literal hard work, perseverance, and intelligence. So that intelligence doesn't even necessarily have to be you. That can be your skating coach, and that willingness to break down that skill and rebuild it through repetition and repetition and repetition until it becomes second nature. And then, you know, that's on ice, and then off ice, it's all about explosive work. And again, that dedication comes in, is like, how much time are you willing to live in the gym, to live, you know, doing your wind sprints, to do the one-legged exploding movements back on one foot. It's not fun. I don't know about you guys, but I hate leg day at the gym. I'm like, oh God, here we go. It hurts and it's hard, but the payoff can be massive. And so that's when we see these players take those big strides with their skating. People should know, they should recognize the sweat and the blood and the tears that went into getting to that, because it isn't easy, but it is doable if you have that dedication to breaking it down and rebuilding it. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, no, just so it's all stride based, basically. Are you willing to change your stride, or are you physically capable of changing your stride? And for those who are capable and willing, that's how skating gets better. And for some guys, just leg length or eliminates an ability to change the stride. Is that fair?
I mean, flexibility, huge as well, right? So having that flexibility, but again, that is something that you can create through practice, right? Through stretching, through different activities. But it's absolutely, you need to have an explosive stride out to the side, and then that toe gets that snap at the finish, and then you recover right underneath the body, and it's getting everything in order. The core strength, the leg strength, all the way down to the ankle flexion and that toe snap. It all has to come together. We talk about like Elias Pettersson, who completely remade his shot. And he talked about, I think he said he broke it down into something like 15 different individual movements, and he recreated it. It's very similar with skating. There's a million tiny little movements that you can do that will give you another percent. And I work with younger kids, and I even get them on film too, having them skating towards me, having them skating away from me. And then I can break it down. Here's where your leg is extending to. Here's where it needs to be extending to. Here's the depth you need to be getting in your posture to get there. Here's where you need to be leaned over. Are you generating enough power forward? Are you swinging those arms a little bit side to side? Do you have a heel kick like Vasily Podkolzin always had, this elaborate heel kick? Wasted movement, wasted time and effort. You're not recovering quick enough. So you could write a book on breaking down skating strides, and maybe one day I will.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
Who would have thought
10 people will read it maybe, but yeah.
Who would have thought here, Cam, a team that has traded away an awful lot of draft capital over the last decade or so, and is ramping up to be a contender in the National Hockey League, at least so they hope. Who'd have thought that we'd have successful prospect stories coming out of training camp? But we've got that with Kirill Kudryavtsev being a bell of the ball, if you will. Elias Pettersson came in with expectation, couple loud giveaways, but I think he's maintained his status as somebody to watch. Filmer Ulrichsen earns himself a contract. Who sort of stole the show for you from a prospect side of things? And are you as surprised as some of us that was even a story, given where this team has been drafting?
Well, I mean, let's give the flowers, to the scouting staffs, right? So with Ratu, it was a pro scouting staff. With those other players you mentioned, it's the amateur staff. And so that's why those guys do the work, right? That's why a lot of them are unnamed and unmentioned often the time, but they are living in the rinks and they're finding these guys. And it doesn't always work out, but when you do find them, you got to give them credit. So for me, it's Kudryavtsev, and I've been pumping him up for a while. I really like this kid. I liked him as a draft eligible a lot more than being a 7th round pick too, but he just makes smart plays, and he's not overly big. He's not super speedy, but he has kind of across the board skills, and he's smart. And I love that in a player. Pettersson's going to bring a different element. He's going to bring that smash mouth kind of thing that you're going to love and fans are going to really take notice of. But Kudryavtsev is going to be, I'm not saying he's Chris Tanev, but when Chris Tanev was here and he was just, we always say he looked like he was skating with a cigarette in his mouth, right? He was just so calm and collected out there. And that's Kudryavtsev. And I think that, he's probably kind of jumped over 3 or 4 guys on that depth chart, and that I expect he's probably the number 1 call up on the blue line, right? Like Landon, we'll see. He was an all-star in the AHL last year, didn't even get a sniff with the Canucks, right? Like he's not in their plans. He's on waivers again. I assume he'll get through it too, probably. But yeah, I think Kudryavtsev it has to kind of be that story, is that he's now knocking on the door. And there wasn't that long ago where people were kind of wondering, like, is he going to go back as an overager to the OHL? Is he going to play in the ECHL next year? It's like, no, this guy's going to play big minutes in the AHL right at 20.
I mean, 3 years from now, Kudryavtsev and Tom Wielander as a pairing?
Could be a lot of fun. They wouldn't be big and they wouldn't be explosive, but they would do a lot of smart things with the puck and just, make sure it gets out, make sure it gets in, make those outlet passes, use their feet. I think it's not outrageous, right? It's easy to look at prospects and be like, oh, let's project them down the line together. And often it doesn't work, but that's
the danger is too, like if Hughes and Roenick are still here, presumably they are, that is not a big front four of defense. So maybe splitting those 2 guys up in Wielander and Kudryavtsev would probably be the MO there. But hey, there's guys, and it's good asset management there to have.
And you'll have Pettersson hopefully too, right? And he'll be that smash mouth guy. So whether he can mix and match with that, with Wielander, yeah.
Let me rein the 2 of you back in here. Can we talk about the contemporary Vancouver Canucks?
You may.
We're going 3 years down the road here.
Sorry,
You guys want to hear about the
Defense
2028 draft
pairings.
class? We
Yeah,
could talk about-
exactly.
yeah.
They
Cam
could add a
Robinson
whole bunch of
works for
who
elite
knows what's. I
prospects.
know.
Yes.
Okay, so let me ask you a forward looking question, but one that's maybe a little closer than 3 years away. If everything hits on our Steve Baines, and he's still here, right? He's still fighting for a gig. What line does he play on? What position does he play? What special teams does he play? What's his NHL profile?
If everything breaks right,
If everything breaks right for
I
the
mean-
pride of Surrey, our Steve Baines.
everything breaks right. Let's just call him a first ballot Hall of Famer here. Just get the number to the rafters right away. No, I mean, realistically, if everything breaks right for him, he's a third liner who can chip in maybe on the PK, who can maybe play on your second power play unit. He's got that kind of jam, that offensive skill. He's got a bit of juice to his game. And I think that's very likely that's kind of the top end for him. You wouldn't expect a player of his ilk to be a top 6 contributor on a good team anyways. But I think that, again, very impressive that he's still with camp, and a testament to just how well he's played all through the preseason, through Young Stars, is that he's making a mark. And the team is obviously like, we want to get another look. We want to give him as much leash as we can, because he looks a lot better than he did in his little call up, his cup of coffee with the Canucks last year. Sure, it was kind of adrenaline fueled that first game where you're like, look at him getting in on the forecheck, and then it really petered out. He wasn't able to generate shots. He wasn't able to really get in on that forecheck anymore. But now, and the adrenaline should be gone, is that he's looking like he can do that. He's looking like he can be a viable NHLer who can get in and bang a little bit, cause some havoc, create some turnovers, and he knows what to do with the puck, obviously, right? He knows how to generate some offense at the junior level, at the AHL level. I don't expect that to translate into too much at the NHL level, but to say that he couldn't one day be a 35, 40-point player, I don't think that's outrageous.
And lastly, from me, Cam, Hughes Hronek, Susie Myers, Forbert Desharnais. Is that the best way to slot your defense pairs for the start of the season?
In my opinion, it's the only way to do it. Is that I don't think you want to move Desharnais up and expense for Myers. But I keep reiterating it every week. I say it to you, is they need to find another right shot defenseman, because that third pair is going to be trouble long term. It might work in the playoffs when things get really tight and really banging up. But it could still be exposed for its foot speed and an inability to move the puck quickly up ice. So that's a pair that could get hemmed in really, really easily. So I do think that it has to be the option, the setup for it for this season, until they can add another piece.
The question is their urgency on that matter. Do you think it's 5-11? Do you think that Rick Tocchet has seen these guys on the ice now and has made this a 5-alarm emergency to get that right shot defenseman, or a
Tocchet was involved in the recruitment of, especially Desharnais. So.
Everything looks great on paper until you see it on the ice, right?
Yeah. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I think that you can't make it a 5-alarm fire at this point, because trades won't happen. It's too early in the season. We're going to have to wait, because all the teams that know they're going to be sellers are going to wait until the last minute so they can maximize their value. And then the teams that don't think they're sellers need a chance to suck for half the year and figure out that they are in fact sellers. So I think we're looking at post-Christmas. We know Rutherford likes to do his business early. So if they made a deal going into that Four Nations face-off, something like that wouldn't surprise me in February, right?
Yep.
And then it gives the team a chance to gel and mesh down the stretch. And I'm always a big proponent of that, because not only are you getting the chemistry, but you're also getting a lot more bang for your buck. You're not getting 20 games out of a player. You're getting 35 or 40 maybe, and then you have the option to resign them if you like them, and you can know the player a little bit better. So I do think that'll be a 2025 issue.
Okay.
I'll ask you about, just because Blake brought his name up today as we were shooting the breeze, Provorov in Columbus, who's a UFA to be at 27 and $4.725 million, and can play both sides, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Is the on-ice product
not the player we thought he was going to be?
No,
obviously.
No,
it's a reduced expectation there. But if you just threw out what you thought he was going to be, and you take the player that it is now, and the fact that they are probably willing to make some trades right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's an option. It would be an option, and he's a good enough player. Like, he's someone that you can feel okay with playing on your second pair. He does have a lot of baggage that comes with him. And so when whatever team, if they do trade for him, has to recognize that you're airlifting him into a team and into an environment with your club, that it might mess with that chemistry too. So that would definitely be weighing on me if I was calling the shots and I was kicking the tires on him. So I would need to know him as a person a little bit better, or get some, just some feelings that he would come in and just not ruffle feathers. But no, I think as a rental could be an option, at the right price anyway.
Right. Gotcha. Next Tuesday we'll reconvene and we'll do predictions and all that fun stuff on the eve of the season. Thank you, Cam Robinson. Appreciate that.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
It's happy hour on Sekeres and Price. Today's beer of the day from Yellow Dog is the Retriever Golden Ale.
Some Price from the historic Wall Center, and this next interview brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians. Thanking Seas fans for another great season at the Nat. If you're looking to guarantee your seat for the 2025 season, visit canadiansbaseball.com or call 604-872-5232. And here he is, one day ahead of schedule. Patrick Johnson, beat writer of the Province and Post Media, covering the Vancouver Canucks, normally a Thursday guy. Thank you for your flexibility with us, Paige. We saw yesterday at practice something that could very well resemble the opening night lineup a week from tonight, Rogers Arena against the Calgary Flames. Let's start on the defense, where Hughes and Hronek are together. No surprise there. I mean, Hughes had effectively bossed them into this earlier in camp when he said, I don't know why you change anything. I want to Norris, exactly. And sure enough, they took their cues. Susie Myers, Forbort, Desharnais, and so very much looking like they're going to load up two pairs. It's our poll question today. Is this the best way to splice up, divvy up, structure the pairs?
I guess, yeah. I mean, this is something I mentioned last week, and it is a question mark I've had since this is the direction they went in, the beginning of free agency, that they went with a couple guys in Desharnais and Forbort who I think bring question marks with them, and it's now a question of how do they work as a pair once the real action starts. For a guy who's mostly been a depth defenseman the last few years, Desharnais, who is big and strong. But we saw a lot of in the playoffs, and you could see that there were some struggles. I mean, Desharnais has been a bit of a partner-dependent player, so he was terrible with Darnell Nurse, but he was okay away from him. I think it's matchups, and this is what it's all going to come down to. As you mentioned, that Hughes-Hronek pairing, I mean, it was so dominant last year. Are you going to lean on them? They can't lean on them early, but when push comes to shove, they're going to lean on them anyway. It really comes back to me. I mean, Carson Soucy was quality. I was impressed with him last year. It's how much does Tyler Myers have left in the tank? How can they manage their way around all this in terms of the system and the structure and everything?
Blake and I debated this yesterday, or last week, I should say. And I was very much, make sure you have an okay skater / puck mover on each pair. And then that would presumably allow Myers to be in a more appropriate role at his age, playing more appropriate minutes. But then that does elevate Desharnais. So the question is, if you're going this route, I guess you're leaning heavy minutes on these four gentlemen, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the other thing is, guys, I mean, we've been a pie in the sky. The Canucks would love to get that second pair right shot defenseman, obviously.
Yeah.
But are they, if that's not going to manifest itself in the first 2 months of the season, are they just as well off by going to find a number 5 left defenseman who can make that third pair more of a legit pair? Because Forbort and Desharnais are effectively the same quality of player, and they're playing together, and they're both 6'7" guys. Yeah. So that is a fashioned final pairing that is not great.
No, I think there's a part of me wonders if there is exactly that. There's a placeholder element here that they're like, we're just going to roll with this as long as we can, and we'll go out and find someone, or maybe, just maybe, there's a kid on the farm that's going to surprise us. And obviously, we saw the play of Kirill Kudryavtsev. I don't think this season is going to be a solution, But that's and I wrote about this on the weekend. In him, in Elias Pettersson, and perhaps even Surmigno, there is something, if you squint, something of a pathway coming with a defenseman or two coming internally. Like, here's the stat, guys. Since Alex Edler was drafted in 2004, there are 4 Canucks draft picks as defensemen who have become essentially NHL regulars of any kind. And that means you're including Kevin Connaughton, who has been up and down.
Wow.
You're probably years.
Including Gustav Forsling.
That's Forsling, that's Hughes, that's Ben Hutton, and that's Kevin Connaughton.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Wow.
So it's Hughes. Well,
they've had guys play games.
Yeah.
They've had guys play games. You know, Nikita Triamkin, right? Like, played games. They've had guys play games. Guillaume Brisebois played games. Jack
but guys with NHL careers.
And have been made NHL careers.
Yeah.
That's what you get.
Oh, wow.
2 guys.
In 20 years.
Rathbone
and 2 of them have never even played here.
And I'm Connaughton and Hutton, good on them for forging NHL careers, but like not consequential NHL careers. No, 2 guys with consequential NHL careers, Hughes and Forsling.
But that said, Connaughton and Hutton, that's Forbort, and that's
right. Who'd you rather have?
Like, those are the guys. That's what you're looking to fill. And if you can't, you know, in the end, the Canucks have been unable to fill that role internally forever.
Can I ask you guys this? Last week before rosters are set, not even a week actually, we've seen them be active at this time of year in the past.
Yes.
Can anyone see a Nils Hoglander for a defenseman trade in the next week?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't blow me away.
A trade, like Patrick Allvin has done this both years, right? Like, he's done a last minute move. I mean, that is in general. Also, it's funny. I'm keep reading a lot of old stories, and there's been constant moves by this organization. I think it's true of almost every team in the league. There are moves that happen at the end of camp. Absolutely.
But he makes trades. Like, other teams make moves. He makes trades, which a lot of GMs
could very well come out of this. Absolutely.
Yeah, in strap-capped era, a lot of the GMs were like, "Oh, my hands are tied. I can't make any moves." And Alvin's like, "Screw that. I'm going out there and making trades."
And now Rick Tocchet's also got the leash guys to go to them and say, "Guys, that ain't it.
Not good enough." You know, I like our size, but I don't like our mobility. I don't like our puck transportation, and we are way better off if Forbort and Juleson slot as 7 and 8 than as 5.
And look at this way, like, in the system, right? You're waiting for things in the overall system to happen. You're waiting for, Detroit to make a decision with a goalie. But now that we know how the NHL and the NHLP have agreed to deal with Johnny Gaudreau's cap hit, rest in peace. Don Waddell has said, I am looking to add a veteran player. Now, I'm not suggesting the Canucks have that veteran player, but he has essentially been assigned a task by the NHL. You need to get $2 million on your cap. And you can do that however you want to do it. So I don't think this is what happens. But I said there, you could send him Tucker Pullman for free. And then Columbus is cap compliant. Waddell has made it clear he'd like to get a player that can play. But all of a sudden you get put off.
Yeah.
You got some stuff to work with. So
that'd be good. Okay. Moving up to the forward ranks. And Coach certainly dangled the carrot there with Daniel Sprong. We wondered whether it would be Connor Garland moving on up as a right shot guy who's got some goal scoring. We wondered if it would be Nils Hoglander, who had played a lot with Pettersson and DeBrusk in the past. We even, wondered whether Kiefer Sherwood or someone like that could make a bid for it. But Coach had Sprong there yesterday.
Yep.
And his caveat was, he thinks it can be a damn good line for us, but they've got to make sure that they play inside and they come up with pucks too. So it sounds like he's a little concerned about dirty areas and forechecking and things like that if he keeps that trio together.
I see it as a group that is there to do a very obvious thing, and that's score goals. I don't think we've ever thought of Elias Pettersson as not wanting to go to dirty areas, but certainly a challenge to the player, and a point of clarity, I suppose, to Jake DeBrusk as well, and Daniel Sprong. I mean, internally, let's be clear, they knew what this player was going to be. They knew the challenges that he presents. They know the strengths he has, and we've seen the strengths. We saw the goal last week. This is a guy who wants the puck on his stick, who loves to attack the net. It is when he is without the puck that the questions come. And that's why I thought that, for instance, last week, the variation when we saw Sherwood skating a little bit with them, I'm like, that could be your late game variation, right? Sprong is just your, last 10 minutes of the game. It's Kiefer Sherwood that's skating with those two and not Daniel Sprong. And as has been said many times, Rick Tocchet loves his pairs. And so then or his duos. His duo here is clearly DeBrusk and Pettersson. At least that's what he hopes it will be. And it'll be some variation of Sprong plus Sherwood plus whoever. Garland. I mean, listen, Garland is also clearly a guy that deserves more ice time. You would do well to have more ice time. Should he fit well with Elias Pettersson? I absolutely think he should, because if there's one thing you do when you're with Connor Garland, it's keep your stick on the ice, and Elias Pettersson's very good at keeping his stick on the ice. So they need that line to fire. That is not a news flash to anybody. They need Pettersson to get back to the player he was in January and not the player he was in February and March and April.
Are you more intrigued by Sprong with those two guys than Heinen with Besser and Miller?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think Sprong's just a better goal scorer, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's just, the offensive ability is there. Heinen is interesting. I like the player, but generally he's been a third liner, and now you're asking him to be whatever that line is, second line, first line, right? Like,
but they're kind of asking him to play like a third liner on that top line. So that's not
the way they're asking him to be deployed, which is to be the guy that helps helps Miller forecheck,
right?
And that's fine.
The danger in doing what you're talking about, the old Brandon Sutter sort of promotion when they picked him up from Pitt. Oh, he can be a second line center now. You're asking him to do something different. The good news is I don't think they're asking Heinen to do anything different. It may have different results on the bottom line. Like, I think he'll get peripheral points a lot more now. But the good news is I don't think they're asking much more of him, which is nice.
Well, think back to last year's critique we had of the Miller-Besser line, which was that, Phil DiGiuseppe, good guy, worked hard, but he's not good enough. You need to be better than Phil DiGiuseppe. And I think Danton Heinen certainly is better than Phil DiGiuseppe. The question is how much better, and does that matter?
Yes.
And I'm not. We'll find out. My instinct is no, but Danton Heinen is a quality, handy forward that plays two ways. But he's never been a guy that dominates a shift, and never been a guy that's really been leaned on to be a top six forward. So it's a big challenge. It's rolling the dice on something, and that's what you have to do in today's NHL. Is you have to be willing to take some risks and try some things. And there's certainly a projection here that they are hoping works out. There is a bit of risk. It's not a swing for the fences risk. It's this, can I stretch a single into a double?
Speaking of risk, I've never seen a team mitigate it more than the Vancouver Canucks this preseason by not playing its star players. But based on what's happened around the NHL, keeping a banged up JT Miller out of the lineup until the last possible second seems like a good play.
Yesterday was a bloodbath.
Yeah. And given he got a little bruised, JT Miller did in the scrimmage, I don't think anybody's got a problem with it at this point.
Before we get to Miller, how Arbor Chekai is allowed to take 2-match penalty is ludicrous. Like, just what are we even doing here? This is it's again. Like I mentioned, I end up at times look at old stuff. The suspensions that used to get thrown around. Pardon me, I forget the goalie's name, but whoever the goalie was for the Detroit Red Wings, large part of the 80s. Was known for slashing guys and got suspended. Ron Hextall had multiple 6+ game suspensions for slashing people, and that was just par for the course. And apparently now it's, I don't know, some of his feelings might get hurt if we suspend a total lunatic for more than 2 games. Anyway, that's my rant.
Yeah,
Miller. I do laugh a little bit about this because I have, of course, been one person who's been downplaying this. I spoke with JT last week when everybody else was in Abbotsford. He wasn't going to be playing. He quipped, "Oh, I'm injured. I can't talk." Because, of course, the rules, if they're injured, they can't talk.
Yes.
They don't have to talk. I'm injured. And he just listed off. And it was, it was a bit of a running. We just had a laugh. I said 2 minutes. He goes, "Oh, yeah. And I said, and there was no indication. This is a guy who's been on, beyond the normal practice time, doing his seminar hockey, the hockey 101 seminars that him and Rick Tocchet just love to do. I mean, these guys love thinking about hockey, the way it works. If you're ever out at UBC, pay attention to how long those guys stay on the ice. They have to get kicked off the ice by the ice guys.
Rink rats through and through.
Just rink rats. Just absolutely love it. So whatever it is exceedingly minor. And like I was mostly saying, I think mostly it's just JT Miller hates preseason hockey, and I get it. Yeah. He also knows he needs to skate it once, but it's a long year.
It's a long year.
The great line from Michael Strahan, the former football player, about retiring and then coming back before the first game of the season, the year the Giants won the Super Bowl. And his comment was, well, I wasn't sure if I wanted to play again, but I was damn sure I didn't want to go through another training camp again.
Yes. KG move.
There's only so much. Yeah. There's only so much you can really get out of the way, you know?
Akito Hirose, he's concussed,
right?
Getting flashbacks to Breezeball last year. And that could be a real pebble in their shoe when setting that. No? Explain.
Oh, in terms of the injury. Yeah.
Well, in terms of setting your opening night roster and wanting to accrue cap space and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. I mean, it is.
You can't send him down when he's hurt, right?
Yeah, but there's also
the learning from
there's also season opening injured reserve. Like it's all.
Okay, but that counts against your cap, no? Anyways,
there
and your roster.
Oh, he's on a he's on a two-way, right? This is the one that I remember. I was thinking about it, and I meant to look this up, and it's challenging. There's absolutely this is a challenge. It's not just Hirose. It's the Joshua situation. It's the Demko situation. It's Pullman still being there. You know that they don't want. It's going to be very difficult for them to start the season not in LTI. Like they can do it, but they have to make some choice. And one of the choices was putting Phil Giuseppe on waivers. You know, that was not a thing they necessarily wanted to do, but probably going to have to do. They are almost certainly going to have to make a choice between Friedman and Juleson. One of those guys is going to have to go on waivers, right? Like, there were lineup even last week when we were kind of briefly considering Jonathan Lekaramaki, and I wrote a thing about it on the weekend, how he gets, because it was close. Like, this is a guy that's close. But it required you accepting the fact that you're going to keep a guy that doesn't need waivers over guys that need waivers.
Mm-hmm. It is a one-way deal.
It is.
Yes, I see it. Okay.
Yeah. So never mind, because season opening IR is meant to help with situations like that. You know, but if you have to be on a two-way, you have to be on a two-way.
Okay, buddy. Well, we got a big week ahead here, and we'll have a game in the books next time we talk to you. So you'll get a little sneak preview before we ask you to make predictions and all of that.
Right. Yeah.
We look forward to your work over the weekend here as they do set the roster and get ready to roll for real.
Don't get injured in the preseason. It's going down like flies these days.
I'm trying my best not to, boys.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
There's some price from the Historic Wall Center. You can text us 778-402-9680. Email live at scaresomeprice.com. It's the Great Clips inbox. Great Clips.
Microphone's not on. Microphone wasn't on.
We're putting you on E's and O's.
Now it's going to be great.
Mike not
wasn't previously
for Great Clips.
Whew.
Still preseason for him.
Yep.
Okay, so a huge one tonight at BC Place. Whitecaps and Sounders. It's not just a Cascadia derby. It is for position in the MLS West. Vancouver right now sitting right up on the fault line. Any further drop from 7th place puts them into a play-in game. But with a game in hand, the ability to move all the way up to 4th place, which would give them home pitch in a best 2 out of 3.
It's pretty clogged there in the middle of the West.
It is very clogged there. We'll talk lineup here, and then we could have a bigger issue for next week. That is not good news for the Caps. But what do you know about tonight?
Well, it's all intertwined. It's all intertwined. Yesterday at training, for using that as the indicator, Ali Ahmed did not participate. So if you don't participate, you're probably not playing. You're probably not even on the bench. Ryan Gauld was half there, half not. Not a good sign for Ryan Gauld. Maybe bench, probably not. I'd certainly not starting with that training session. And neither was Stuart Armstrong. So it is going to be a different looking lineup. Some of the mainstays I would expect, Fafa Pico and Brian White and Andres Kubas. I mean, they're still the spine of the team. Ranko Veselinovic, all those guys are still there. But is there going to be offense without Ryan Gauld, without Ali Ahmed? That's going to be a bigger question mark.
Yeah. And then there's this. Next week is an international break. The only problem is the Whitecaps have a match smack dab in the middle of it.
They shouldn't, but they do.
Sunday, October 13th against LAFC. This was the rescheduled match after LAFC went far enough along in Leagues Cup that they had to postpone an MLS regular season match against the Whitecaps. Well, at the time, nobody made that big a deal of it, but Ryan Gauld has been recalled to Scotland and the national side, where they have actually games of import against Croatia and against Portugal on the 12th and the 15th, meaning he will miss this match against LAFC. Worse yet, Sam Adekugbe, Ali Ahmed, both called up to the Canadian national team for a friendly, and that might mean they are unavailable to play for the Caps in what could be a huge match, the game in hand they have against all these other direct competitors.
Yeah,
in the MLS West mid-table.
Yeah, like we make jokes or we reference the game in hand and the ability to jump into the top four. Well, everybody's playing tonight, so they actually don't use up the game in hand tonight. The one time that they play,
everybody plays Saturday too. Yeah. When the Caps have Minnesota.
So they actually don't use this up until the following Sunday, the penultimate game of the season against LAFC, who are also a game behind everybody else. So it's a big one. If they win these next two, it's less big. If they win these next two matches at home, reduces the enormity of that match. But hey, you want to climb as high as you can on the ladder here. It'll improve the team you play against immensely the higher you climb on the ladder. So missing those three players would be devastating. Now, if they played the game in August as it stood, remember Ryan Gauld was injured then. Maybe you didn't have Ryan Gauld anyway. And then Sam Adekugbe was pretty injured there too. So unclear how much worse the lineup would have been.
Yeah.
But
one more reason to hate Leagues Cup, what it did to the schedule with the Caps going basically a month without a game, and then what it's done here. BC Lions.
Before we move on, we should mention the rest of the Canadian men's national team. We've talked about dual nationals.
Oh, right.
A bunch of the young dual nationals are getting a chance from Jesse Marsh, including Santiago Lopez, who we saw as a member of Pumas in Leagues Cup come to town. These are all young players that they're trying to cap tie, trying to bring into the program. Jamie Knight Lebel, who is a Bristol City he's actually played for Bristol City in the championship. He's 19 years of age. Now he's in League Two on loan to get more playing time. So a bunch of young players being called in because there's still injuries to guys like Ishmael Kone. So interesting lineup. Go take a look at it. Some of the old guard or the normal guard, if you will, are still around. Alfonso Davies has been called, Jonathan David. But there's been a few players banged up. So some young players into the fold.
BC Lions home Friday against the Calgary Stampeders. We outlined the stakes of this one yesterday. It's effectively a must-win. What I want to do here is go through the Lions' remaining schedule. So Friday at home against Calgary. A week from Saturday at Saskatchewan. And that will be a big one, irrespective of the results this weekend. Will BC still be a half game behind the Riders? If BC wins, Saskatchewan loses, they could be a half game ahead of the Riders. Saskatchewan has a tie here, which in one way complicates it, but in the other sense makes it tidier. You know who's going to be ahead of whom. It won't go down to tiebreaker. And, of course, if the Lions lose and Saskatchewan wins, then they're a game and a half back. They would have to they would have to win the game and beat Montreal here at home in the season finale. and have Saskatchewan lose out. Now, the good news there is that Montreal may have nothing to play for in that final game here. May actually even send a skeleton crew out here to BC Place, save some of the air miles for some of their top players like Cody Fajardo, who's the odds-on pick for MOP, you may have seen. Then the Lions have a bye in the final week of the regular season, so they will sit back and watch Toronto play Edmonton, Winnipeg play Montreal, Calgary play Saskatchewan, which could be huge. And, of course, if Winnipeg were to win in Hamilton here on Friday night, then the Lions could do no better than second place in the West, and they would know that as the game kicks off against the Stamps. Injury report brings some good news. Justin McInnes, the second leading receiver in the Canadian Football League, was back full practice yesterday. He did not practice Monday. Javon Catoy, the other fine Canadian slot back they have, ankle. He continues not to practice, as well as the offensive lineman Tyler Packer and the defensive back Jordan Perryman. Poll question results from Tuesday. We asked you, will Aatu Räty make the team? More than 1,000 votes here. Blake, what did the people say?
People say yes.
Percentage?
65.
68. Very good. Malcolm, don't really care, to be honest, but he's shown he can be an effective NHLer one day, and that is massive for the team. But to answer, I don't think he will be there the opening night lineup. I expect him to be at the big club sooner rather than later. Austin and Langley, should he? Yes. Will he? No. Probably for cap and roster management reasons. And then Chris, I think with Joshua out to start, he does. Whether he sticks once Dakota returns is questionable.
And that is definitely part of the reason why, hey, that's one, fewer spots for him to jump over to get into the lineup. Maybe not the lineup, but the roster for opening night.
Errors and omissions from yesterday's program. Disjointed show on YouTube. We had a computer error. So this segment actually ran before our interview with Jeff Patterson. Typically our two guest segments will run, and then this segment will run on the YouTube side of things. Last week, I said Kansas City and Atlanta played the only interleague series to end the baseball season. There was actually 3. Miami played Toronto, and how about the Blue Jays packing it in and getting destroyed twice by a 100-loss team? You could tell a lot of guys had checked out. Shameful, unprofessional. And the Pirates played the Yankees. Don't like that.
No.
You should try and get as many series, and I realize the baseball schedule is a huge matrix, but would love, that you have to have one interleague series at all time because it's 15 and 15 teams. So would have loved if it was only 1 as opposed to 3. And then Canucks 7th round picks to play games for the team. And Dan Murphy went back since the NHL has gone to a 7-round draft, with the 7th round being the final one. Mario Bliznak and Aiden McDonough are the only 2. But in Canucks history, you got Doug Lidster, you got Dixon Ward, 7th round pick. And then you have some obscure guys. Brandon Reed played 13 NHL games, 13 games with the Canucks, 7th round pick in 2000. Bruce Holloway, a 7th round pick in 81, played 2 games. Danny Glore, a 7th round pick in 72, played 2 games. And then Blake, a 7th round pick in the 1988 supplemental draft.
Oh,
Steve McCatchan, 1 NHL game. Do they do supplemental drafts anymore? Hockey?
No.
I know they still do them in football.
And
But
baseball,
the supplemental draft.
And they got rid of the baseball one too, didn't they?
Well, there are supplemental rounds in the baseball draft, or they may not just call them compensation rounds now.
Yeah.
There are still supplemental drafts in the NFL and the CFL reserved for draft eligible players who declare eligibility, or basically have eligibility discovered after the actual college draft of that year.
That's strange that you need an entire draft for that.
Well, and you want to, I've talked with some managers over the past who have dealt with these things. You want to talk about monotony. They roll call the order of the draft. Do you want to take anyone or pass? And of course, most teams pass.
Yeah.
And then they run through basically however many rounds of teams passing. And occasionally there's a team that says, yes, we select that guy because if you use that pick in the supplemental draft, you lose it in the next year's
Actual
college.
draft?
Yeah.
Yeah, not worth it.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and
Pass.
connecting with us. Should have passed on that explanation.
Yes.
And on Steve McKitchen. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Follow on social, Twitter, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. I suppose I should call it X now, though. Live on many of those platforms, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. We have some new things going on with the show next week we'll tell you about. Until then, please do support the community sponsors that support us and keep it local. Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.